being recorded.
Okay, so good evening and welcome to the launch of the Careers Guide in conjunction with the Dictum Society and sponsored by the Colleges of Law. Before we begin, I would like to begin by acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of Australia and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So my name is May, I am the Dictum President, and I will quickly go through some housekeeping rules with everyone before I pass it on to our Director of Careers. This session will run for 1.5 hours. We may finish earlier, but we'll see how we go. I will get the ball rolling with some general things, which is if you can please remain muted during the session, that would be appreciated. And if you can have your cameras on, that would be lovely too. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please use the chat function to put that question in there, or use the raise hand function as well. Okay, so I will now introduce our Director of Careers, Matthew, who will take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks, May, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. The theme of tonight is careers, and we are launching the Careers Guide. We are currently just working on the last final bits, and then it will be released to the public. So keep an eye out for that in the coming couple of days. But in the meantime, we've got an absolutely fantastic panel here tonight to talk all things careers. So I now will just introduce the panel that we have tonight. So first we have Pam Christou, who is the Legal Placements Coordinator here at VU. We also have Brian Delapan, who is the Talent Acquisition Consultant at Legal Aid. We also have Louise Conwell. Louise is a partner in criminal firm Starry, Norton and Halfin. And finally, we have Jennifer Jones, and Jennifer is a director at the West Justice, and she's a she's a legal director at West Justice, and she's also a principal lawyer of the Employment and Equity Law Program. So basically just a quick overview of how the session's going to be run today. I'm just going to get the ball rolling just with a few sort of questions to our panelists just about the careers space. As May mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them across in the chat. That said, we have put aside a bit of time at the end where you can certainly ask your questions. So you can certainly wait and then ask it then, or you can put it in the chat and one of us will read it out to the panelists then. So first things first, I'd like to introduce our first guest tonight, and that is Pam Christou. And as I said, Pam is a Legal Placements Coordinator here at VU's College of Law and Justice. She has experience in human resources and recruitment and stakeholder partnerships and relationships, placement facilitation and student support. Now, I just wanted to let everyone know that we are going to be having a more comprehensive session regarding what Pam does and the actual mechanics of how you find your placements and how you get started in that side. So Pam is just here tonight just to talk in a more general sense about careers and what she does at VU. And please, everyone, keep an eye out via email or via Facebook or however you get your information about Dictum for that upcoming event, which will most likely be held in November. First, so Pam, I'd just like to hand it over to you. I've just got a question for you, if you don't mind. First, can you just tell us, just a little bit about what you do at VU and how you help students get ready for their future law careers?
Thank you, Matthew. My role at Victoria University, as Matthew said, is the Legal Placements Coordinator, involves assisting students to link with and to navigate, I suppose, career progression, but also to link with stakeholders and create opportunities for students to gain placements. And so we have partnerships with primarily community legal centres, and Jennifer being from West Justice, one of our partners is West Justice, and there's some students here that have undertaken that program. And so there are other organisations such as Victoria Legal Aid, we have state trustees, we also have Young Workers Centre. We also, opportunities also come up from private legal firms who would like to assist students to come and do an internship. And so I assist in, posting those opportunities for students to apply. I also put opportunities up for students for clerkships and traineeships when they become available each year. And we've just actually, those have just closed for firms. I also then put up opportunities for students on, for example, how to shadow a barrister. We just recently ran the Victorian Bar Shadowing Program, which was fantastic, and that will also come up again once the Vic Bar would like to initiate that. So there's lots of opportunities there. There's also opportunities where students, through our various career supports such as VU Employ and the Learning Hub, look for employment opportunities. And so, applying for legal assistant roles or paralegal roles. So engaging with VU Employ to look at their resumes, look at their cover letters, and apply for entry-level legal opportunities also creates that pathway whilst you're studying at the same time. So part of that role is to facilitate that process. And in that session that you talked about, Matthew, we will engage VU Employ similarly to last year to talk about their role and how students can access those services. So that's sort of the main, part of my role. And I also support in things like the MOOCs and organising those, and also engaging other industry to come to certain forums. And what's important is also just to ensure that we have strong partnerships with the profession.
That's great. Thanks so much, Pam. Some really interesting information there. And of course, anyone in this room that has dealt with Pam before just knows just how helpful and knowledgeable she is in this space. So feel free to please reach out. I will certainly be putting the information out there for that upcoming session as well. So thank you so much, Pam. I'd like to move on to our next guest now. Brian Delapan. Brian is the Talent Acquisition Consultant at Victorian Legal Aid. Brian manages Victorian Legal Aid's various pathways and graduate programs, and he works part of the People and Culture team at Legal Aid. He is an experienced HR generalist professional with industry experience, most recently in the Victorian State Government and the not-for-profit sector. His key skills and experience includes employee relations, recruitment and selection, policy writing, labour law interpretation, and facilitation. Welcome, Brian. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Matthew, and lovely to be here.
So first, can you just tell me a little bit about what you do at Legal Aid as part of the talent acquisition role, and then maybe just talk about some of these various pathways and graduate programs and any other opportunities that perhaps are possible through Victorian Legal Aid.
Yeah, sure. So my role at Victoria Legal Aid is to support the People and Culture team from a recruitment perspective. So the main part of my role is coordinating a number of our pathway programs. Probably the most well-known is the New Lawyers program, which is it's a graduate program aimed at people who have obtained their post-admission, who have gained post-admission experience of up to 12 months and are looking for their first sort of stint in a lawyer role at VLA. And it's quite a competitive process in terms of the program. It's run on an annual basis. Usually we have around about 9 to 10 or up to 12 participants that are part of the program each year. And the program runs over the course of 2 years, and through that 2-year period, the staff member would be able to gain 4 rotations and placements throughout the organization, and an opportunity for them to experience and expand on their areas of interest in terms of practice areas of law. And then be able to complete that program after 2 years with a better idea in terms of their interest areas and where they want to work long term. And hopefully that's at VLA, which has certainly been the case with a number of our prior NLP New Lawyers Program participants in the program. They've been able to develop their careers at VLA and worked with different parts of the organization over that time. So it's that's probably in terms of pathway programs, that's probably the core one that VLA is most known for. We often advertise in March of each year and run through quite an extensive recruitment and selection process, given the number of applications that come through for the program. And the successful participants often start the program in around about October on an annual basis. But apart from the New Lawyers Program, which I've talked a fair bit about, is we do have a number of other placement and clerkship programs that are run at VLA. So an example of that is a strong partnership that we have with VU, and I have had the opportunity to speak to Pam Christo on a couple of occasions around the Steve Mile program, which is run through Victoria University, and that is a law placement that runs for about 8 months through our Sunshine office. So that's probably, in terms of another connection point with Victoria University, that's probably one that's specific to this cohort, I guess. There are a number of other programs that we run through Leo Cousins. We'd have a number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander related programs as well at the graduate law program, as well as our clerkship programs. But I think probably apart from looking after our pathways programs is also looking at new opportunities to expand around the different pathways that we do, that we can get more involved in.
That's great. Thanks, Brian. Some really great info. And I'm looking to do my placement at Legal Aid, so I'll hopefully be starting there in the next few weeks. So it's great to meet you. And so my second question for you is, so what tips do you have for the people that are really just starting to start their career and maybe still in university, but then are considering perhaps looking at legal aid as somewhere that they might be interested? So perhaps they might be just starting out, but they're thinking, well, this new lawyers program actually sounds really cool. So is there any tips you've got for them?
Yeah, sure. I think this, from a recruitment and selection perspective, and more broadly speaking, I think it's really important as a potential candidate to do a lot of that homework around the organizations that you want to work for. I think that it's really important to ensure that you have that values alignment piece around where you see your career direction going and what you aspire to, and being able to find organizations that speak in a like-minded way to what you're looking for. And I think I've carried that as probably a main rule in my book when I've been looking at my own career path and where I would like to go, and wanting to work in certain sectors or with organizations that have a strong focus to similar values to me, which is around social justice and supporting vulnerable clients in the community. And I think that's something that was really important to me in terms of finding that fit. So I think as a first step, it's probably looking at those organizations from a culture perspective, looking at the values that they offer, and then going through that process of understanding that, so that when you go to make that application, you have at least a good insight in terms of how you can pitch your application to an organization, harnessing the experiences that you've gained from previous work that you've done, and being able to provide some really good examples that demonstrates why you're a good candidate for the role. So that would be the first thing that I would really think through in terms of reviewing potential organizations and that fit for you from a values piece perspective. That certainly is something that we look at VLA. For us, it's certainly, I've been involved in a number of recruitment drives, and whilst it's not a golden rule, I think there is that really strong mix that we look for in terms of candidates that are able to demonstrate really good technical skills and experience from a lawyer and law perspective. But then obviously, given the clients that we work with, it's also indelibly important that they're able to demonstrate their interpersonal and client skills, being able to work with vulnerable members of community, being able to communicate clearly with clients. Work in a fast-paced environment is just as important. Adaptability, and so being able to show those sorts of skills come through in your application as well as your interview is going to be just as important. We also look to candidates that are able to provide an insight in terms of how their values align with VLA as an organization, and that is just as important as well.
That's great. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I mean, I love the stuff you're talking about, the values, and really because it does guide where you would potentially like to work. And I imagine somewhere like Legal Aid, which does have that focus on really helping some of Victoria's most vulnerable members of the community, I can really see that the values, gelling with that position would really make a difference to the recruitment phase. So thank you so much. That's really great stuff. And of course, if you've got any questions for Brian, then please either put them in the chat or just wait, and then you'll have an opportunity at the end to ask some more questions. So thank you, Brian. I'm just going to move on to our next panelist now. Our next panelist is Louise Conwell. Louise is a partner of the criminal firm Starry, Norton and Halfin. She became a partner in 2022. She completed a Bachelor of Arts in 2012 and then a Juris Doctor in 2015 at the University of Melbourne. During her studies, Louise completed volunteer placements at Victoria Legal Aid, the Neighbourhood Justice Centre, and the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. Louise has been a practising criminal law since 2017 and has experience in a broad range of matters. She has a particular interest in advocacy and appears in complex criminal matters in the Magistrates Court, the County Court and the Supreme Court. She appears in matters including sexual offences, homicides, drug matters and violent offences. Prior to practising law, Louise was an associate to a judge at the County Court of Victoria. So welcome, Louise. It is fantastic to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
No problems at all. So that's a really fascinating bio I just read out. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about your career. So basically starting, I think, from when you graduated, and if you could just talk a little bit about how you ended up at a partner at at Starry and Norton. That'd be great.
So I'm just recognising now how exhausted I look. I've been in court all day, and so I apologise for the bags under my eyes. So when I was at uni, I did various sorts of placements, which you've touched on, and I had a fair bit of anxiety around what I was going to do with my career. I probably knew quite early on that I wanted to do something different than what my friends were doing, who by and large went down the corporate law path. I didn't know anyone in the law when I was at law school. No one in my family had done law. None of my family friends had done a law degree. And I felt, I guess, probably a bit unmoored from the jurisdiction and the profession. And I think it's worth acknowledging that that's really anxiety inducing at you. What I tried to do is get as much exposure to as many areas of law that I could. And from that, identify the things that I enjoyed doing. So as Matthew's mentioned, I did various placements, ASRC, Legal Aid, Aboriginal Land Council. I also did a corporate clerkship. It became apparent to me really quickly that I didn't enjoy that, but that is an incredibly worthwhile experience to identify what you don't enjoy. And so from that, those sort of collective experiences, and I should just flag actually, I'm really cognizant of the reality that a lot of people are working and have family commitments whilst at uni. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities to do work that's not necessarily always unpaid, and they should be sought out because, people have got really busy lives and really demanding lives, and it's not always the case that everyone's able to do unpaid, significant amounts of unpaid work, and I certainly wasn't in that position. So my placement with Legal Aid was through a practical subject. My placement at the Land Council was paid. It wasn't paid particularly well, but it was paid. And my work at ASRC was paid. So I sought out opportunities where I could. They weren't always the opportunities that my friends were able to secure. I did a lot of sort of reception work and things like that, but I just wanted to see what the law actually looked like and what lawyers did, because I had no idea. What I identified fairly early on was I really enjoyed advocacy. I really enjoyed working on different matters every day. I'm not the type of person that can work on the same project for 18 months. I'm a bit more of a burn and churn person. And I really sort of identified the types of work that pushed back against, these forces of disadvantage and marginalisation that is in the community. And so from that, I sort of narrowed the field, I guess, over time of, well, maybe I'm a bit interested in admin, or I don't mind workplace. And I sort of found my way to crime in that way. So upon graduation, I had no job prospects, but what I did have was a bunch of experience and people I'd met. And I had answered phones at a law firm for 18 months. I did it 1 or 2 days a week, balanced it with work. That was in a family law firm. Didn't have any interest in practicing family law actually, but I had dealt with clients that were in a really crap situation. They were really stressed. They were heightened. I had, dealt with, people that were fighting to establish rights over lands that were stolen from them and their families. And that's an incredibly emotional experience. I'd, worked with clients at the Legal Aid placement and sort of understood all the sort of intersection disadvantage that affect people who call upon that type of help and assistance. And so I thought, look, I've just got to get it in and then it'll work out, right? So I applied for a lot of jobs. I applied for heaps and heaps of jobs. I applied at suburban firms. I applied at Legal Aid. I applied to private firms. And ultimately I landed a gig as an associate at the county court to a judge. I had never met an associate, didn't really know what they did. But that was really the launching pad for my career, because I met and spent time with people that did what I saw in my future, which is advocacy before the courts. And I knew from day dot that it was really important, especially in the industry that I work in criminal law, to build really strong relationships. So if I saw an advocate that I thought was great. The barrister that I thought did an exceptional job, I'd say, do you mind, can I shadow you at your next trial, or can I come and have a coffee with you in chambers? And I pushed my way into this industry. That's not a necessarily easy thing to do, and it takes time. But that is, I think, really how I ended up with this job. I had, seen Sam Norton appear in the county court. I thought, God, he's good at his job, and made those types of relationships. I joined Starries in 2017 or 18, and have worked here since. And truly, my partner always says to me that I've got no idea, my partner in life, not my partner's here, how lucky I am, because I genuinely love my job. I'd do it if I won the lottery.
Well, that's fantastic. It's so good to hear. You can hear the passion too, which is really, really great. So can you just tell me maybe just a little bit more about, what you actually do from a day-to-day perspective?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a misconception around the notion of a private firm. We are a business or a company, but we don't just act for people that pay privately. So in terms of how people fund a criminal defence, they can either pay privately, or if they meet certain criteria, which our friends can explain probably better than I can, they're eligible for a grant of legal aid, and effectively legal aid funds their criminal defence. A lot of that work is done by legal aid. Some of that work is done by private firms with legal aid funding in place. So myself, I have about a 50-50% practice, in that I do a lot of matters that are funded by Victoria Legal Aid. I do a lot of matters that are funded privately. That means, and because we're not a strictly hierarchical firm in the terms of the allocation of matters, I do everything from drive while suspended pleas to defending homicide matters, and sort of everything in between. So my everyday for me is really different. At any given time, I've got about 80 clients, and I do the brief analysis and corresponding with the police or the prosecution, whoever's prosecuting the matter. And I also, at the firm, we're all solicitor advocates, so we do our own court appearances. Trials, we by and large brief, but we still do some of those in-house. So today I did an application for bail in the Supreme Court. Tomorrow I'm in the Magistrates Court doing an intervention order matter and a drink driving plea. So it's really, really varied. In that way, it's a pretty extraordinary job, because none of my days look the same.
Yeah, it sounds really varied and really interesting. So the final question is, so you've kind of gone through some of these tips that you've provided to students wanting to get into career, I think, already in your first answers. But if there's any tips that you perhaps have, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I think getting early, there are not a huge amount of firms, and from my experience, it's really competitive to get a job at Legal Aid, because they are such an incredible organisation to work for. But also, don't cut yourself off from other opportunities. Like, I was a receptionist at a family law firm for quite a long time. There's a huge amount of smaller firms that do criminal work. There are opportunities in, working at courts, magistrates' courts in all the suburban areas as registrars. There are jobs at courts doing research type stuff. Pam can probably assist in some respect that often barristers are looking for research assistants and things like that. It's just a matter of getting your foot in the door. Those of us, particularly that work in defence, really admire relentlessness from those around us. It's something that we look for in the people that we employ. It's something that we look for in the advocates that we brief. And so I admire people that, and often hire people that have, run into me at a networking event, got in touch later, said, can I come and watch you do this matter, or I've seen you in this trial, let's catch up and push and make those connections. Admin, paralegal roles, reception roles, so many of those skills are transferable to criminal practice, because it is getting to know and being able to deal with things on your feet. Take advantage of practical subjects where you can. where your uni offers them, because they're really helpful and they're often run by people that have got really good networks in the industry. You know, you've met me, you've met other people tonight. Get in touch. Like, we're excited by the people that are coming into this industry and that are motivated. Also, I think on 80% of the cover letters that I read, people say, I am committed to social justice. I am passionate about social justice. What I think was really helpful for me, I remember sitting in a session like this at uni about, you know, corporate clerkships, whatever, and they said, you know, make sure you get a subscription to the Australian Financial Review so that you know what's going on in the world of corporate things. And I remember getting that subscription and trying to labour my way through reading the Australian Financial Review, which was of no interest to me. But the principle is get engaged in the industry that you want to work with or work in. So I started reading a lot about, you know, raising the age and the decriminalisation of public drunkenness. And I think at that time there was the movement around, there was children held being kept in custody in Barwon Adults Prison, and about the appropriateness or otherwise of that. And so there are movements and organisations that are doing work that is hand in glove with criminal law. Being able to talk about that and understanding the sort of structural issues and cultural things that we're dealing with as an industry means that you can demonstrate why you're committed to social justice, rather than just saying that line that we often see. So yeah, having a good grasp of the, you know, because no one can come to me as a grad lawyer and say, oh, I can analyse a brief and give someone advice on how to defend a trial. They can't do it, and if they say they can, I don't believe them. But if they understand the pressures that we're dealing with, and the things that mean a lot to us, and the groups and advocacy that's being done on behalf of people like our clients, then it really demonstrates to me why they want to do this job.
Great advice. Thank you so much. It's really interesting. So moving on now to our final panellist, Jennifer Jones. As I mentioned earlier, Jennifer is the Legal Director at West Justice and a Principal Lawyer in the Employment and Equity Law program there. She is the Principal Lawyer for the Employment and Equality Law program. And she's responsible for the team's strategic direction, their risk management, their stakeholder engagement, workload and wellbeing. She holds a Bachelor of Arts and a law degree with honours with a focus on equality and industrial law. She's originally from New Zealand and she moved to Melbourne in 2009 and has over 15 years experience providing authoritative legal, strategic and policy advice in the private, public and not-for-profit sectors. Jennifer's key areas of expertise are employment, privacy, anti-discrimination and human rights law, as well as corporate governance, integrity, compliance and project management. So thank you, Jennifer, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
That's great. So similar to some of the other questions, can you just tell us a little bit about your career progression starting from your university days? Did you study in New Zealand?
Yes, I did. I actually studied at Victoria University in Wellington.
Yes.
It's a different university.
My wife is from Wellington, and yeah, she talks about Victoria University there sometimes as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So so happy to talk about that. So I graduated with an honours degree in history and political science and a law degree, an LLB from Victoria University. And I was admitted in New Zealand in 2007. And as you can see from my bio, I've worked in a range of different types of roles, practicing and non-practicing, over the last sort of 15 years of my career. I did take the traditional route of taking a clerkship, I worked at Minter Ellison when I was in New Zealand. So we did summer clerking in New Zealand. It was just one round back in 2007 or 2006. There weren't a huge amount of opportunities to do additional clerkships like you do in Australia. So I did my summer clerkship, and then that led to a graduate role at Minters in 2007, and I was in their employment law team from the start. I should say that, like Louise, I didn't know what being a lawyer involved or have any understanding about working in the law. And also I didn't try and do any placements while I was at uni, which I probably should have done. I think I should have maybe turned my mind to that while I was at university. I spent a lot of time actually working on the Students' Union. So, you know, not the Law Society, but the Students' Union for Victoria University. And so ended up doing a year of honours before starting in my graduate position as a law grad. So then I was at Minters for 2 years in the employment team. I was really lucky because I got a secondment into the New Zealand Department of Corrections. So I actually worked in the Department of Corrections as an employment law advisor, helping with things like misconduct, unfair dismissals. I actually would go around and visit the prisons and talk to prison managers around, you know, managing their staff, which was kind of a crazy experience for a law grad to have. And then in 2009, I came to Australia. I didn't know much about the options. I didn't really have many sort of connections in Australia. And so I just, again, went into corporate law when I came across, because that was all I knew. So I got a job in a corporate employment law team at Herbert Gear. It's now called Thompson Gear. So it's one of the mid-tier firms over here. It was 2009, the Fair Work Act had just come in. There was a lot of businesses that really wanted to know about their obligations, you know, modern awards, what that meant for their business. And so I got a job in that sort of that context, even though it had been a global financial crisis and other areas of corporate law were contracting, employment law was still growing. So then I worked at Herbert Gear for 3 years, and then I'd done quite a lot of discrimination law matters, and I'd worked on general protections matters. And I even got to work on another secondment, which was a great opportunity in a diversity and inclusion team. So I got to sit in a complaints team and help them with complaints of sexual harassment, bullying, discrimination, those kinds of things, and actually handling them day to day, which was really amazing experience. And so from that, I realised that I had quite a deep interest in human rights and discrimination law in the employment law context. And I saw a job going at the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission, and I applied for it. And I was really lucky to get that job. And obviously those kinds of jobs don't come up very often. But I would say if you've got a keen interest in human rights, always try and apply for those types of jobs, because probably one of the best jobs of my career, I would say. It was working, the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission is a statutory authority. It's an independent body that's part of the Victorian government. So you're considered a Victorian public servant when you go into that role. So I basically spent 5 years in private practice before moving into the public sector in Victoria. And it was a great role because it involved, you know, discrimination and human rights law and really getting into some of those issues from a Victorian perspective, but also litigation, legal policy work. I worked on guidelines to explain the law, but also learning about how a regulator worked in the Victorian context and how, you know, regulatory functions should be exercised. So moving away from employment law more into sort of administrative law, governance, as you mentioned, sort of compliance kind of for an organisation. So I kind of was leaning, you know, into a different area of law at that stage, you know, contract law. So I worked there for 5 years almost. I spent quite a long time at the Commission because there was such a range of different types of things that you can do in those kinds of in-house roles when you work for government bodies. You know, you're not just providing advice on the Equal Opportunity Act, you're also looking at how it organized, you know, how is it run as a body, as a government body. So that was quite interesting work. I decided, though, that I wanted to get back into employment law more specifically and do more practical work like I used to do in those secondments, like the really hands-on helping managers with their employees. So I ended up taking on a workplace relations specialist role within a big Victorian Government Department. So that actually wasn't a legal role. That was a non-practicing role. But I definitely used all my skills that I learned as a lawyer in that position. I was, again, managing employee complaints, running misconduct investigations, working with the health and safety team to help injured workers get back to work, people that were on workers' compensation and off work due to injury, and then trying to get them back into the workplace. It was hugely hands-on, really fast-paced, really busy, and very much problem solving, day to day. So every day was different in that job. And it was really great to be able to use legal skills in a non-legal context, I think. And you certainly do get things like Fair Work Commission and tribunal work, even if you're in non-practicing roles, if you're working in workplace relations. And then the next couple of jobs I took from there were, again, non-legal jobs. I worked for another big Victorian government department as a manager of legal and governance. And so I was working on whistleblowing, complaints handling, privacy, data protection, freedom of information requests. So again, not being a lawyer and advising on those things, but setting up the processes and setting up the policies, and then actually handling the complaints and dealing with the FOI requests. And that really does take legal skill to do those jobs. So while it's not a practicing role, there was certainly sort of exercising administrative law skills that I'd learned along the way. And then finally, I actually worked for the Public Sector Commission in Victoria. So that's actually they're responsible for overseeing the whole public sector, setting standards of integrity and compliance. And I was part of the projects team, the integrity projects team, and working on guidance on acting ethically, acting with integrity as a public servant. So again, not legal work, but you really do need to know about ethics as a lawyer. You really do need to know about acting with integrity. So again, those legal skills really did come into play. And all of those jobs have led to me to where I am now, which is at West Justice, where I basically use all of those skills as the principal lawyer in the employment and equality law team. So, as a member of the senior management team, I'm responsible for the compliance and the ethics of the organisation and the team and the legal advice that we give. But, I'm also, as the principal lawyer, overseeing our practice. So, we provide free employment law advice to people who study, work or live in the Western suburbs. We have a particular focus on youth, international students, women experiencing family violence, and people experiencing economic injustice. We have those employment law services and discrimination law services available. And, I think this is probably my favorite job in all of the ones that I've had, because now I'm working for complainants, I'm working for the workers, and we're actually getting to really help the communities in the Western suburbs in a really practical way. So it's been a really big journey through all the different sectors, basically. The only one that I haven't done is work in-house in a company, I think. But yeah, it's been a ride.
Yeah, what a varied career. It's really really interesting, and it sounds like that you're still absolutely passionate about what you're doing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that maybe Brian said before, about taking your career where you're, finding jobs that are aligned with your values and your interests is really important. I think that's what's going to keep you interested and happy in the job, if it's aligning with what you believe in, and sort of the things that you're interested in.
Well, that's really great. Just one last question, which is, again, do you have any tips about any students here today that perhaps want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, like I said before, I would probably not wait until after you finish your degree to think about clerking, like I did. Probably getting a head start on that is a good idea. But also, doing the clinical student placement. If you did that at West Justice, you might end up working with me in my team, or you could end up in our family violence or family law team. We have an economic justice team, which deals with tenancy law, fines, consumer and civil law matters. And we have a youth law team, which does both criminal and civil work. I'd also say, if you're still studying, to think about subjects that you like. and they'll make you want to study them. There's nothing worse than studying subjects that are super boring because you think that that's going to help you, I guess, in your career later on. You really can't plan your career. From what I've experienced, it's good to have like a general idea about what you want to do, but 10 years ago, or even when I arrived in Australia in 2009, I don't think I could have told you this is where I would have ended up. So yeah, not all legal paths are linear. You don't just start at one job and work your way up to the top. You can try different things along the way. And then the last thing I was going to mention was LinkedIn, because a lot of people do use LinkedIn, and it's kind of that networking point that Louise was making about getting in touch with people that have the same interests as you. But I would really say that if you're going to add a total stranger on LinkedIn, send them a personal message about why you're doing that. Because I get a lot of LinkedIn requests from complete strangers, and they've often got they've just created a message that is, they're clearly using it for everyone. But if you want to tell me why you want to connect with me, that's probably the best way of going about it. I saw that you're an employment lawyer, I'm really interested in that area of law, and I want to connect on LinkedIn. It could be as simple as that. Or, I've had some experience in this area and I would like to connect with you. Otherwise, it comes a bit out of the blue. But, creating those networks.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all our panelists. Well, that really concludes the first part of our session here today. So basically, I would like to open up the floor, I guess, to anyone that would like to ask any of our panelists a question. You can either raise your hand or just jump in, or if you're a bit shy, you can certainly put the question into the chat. So would someone like to start us off and ask a question to one of our panelists? Oh yes, we have someone's hand up there. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Darcy, yeah, absolutely, Darcy. Please ask your question.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Question for Brian. I apologise if you've spoken to this already, Brian, but working with Victoria Legal Aid versus working in private practice, what would you say is the main advantage to you as a worker, with experience?
Sorry, Darcy, I missed halfway through that question. Can you just repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, no, certainly. I'm just wondering what how you describe the advantage of working at legal aid over working in private.
The advantage of working at legal aid versus private practice. Okay. That's a very individual question, I have to say, because it's going to mean different things to each person in terms of the working in private practice versus working at legal aid. I think probably the main advantages that I can think of with working at legal aid are I guess there's opportunities to work with vulnerable communities, and if that is an area of interest of yours, and when I say it's an individual thing, I think that what I'm trying to get to is what drives you and where do you want your value add to be? Where do you want to direct that? So that's probably a key thing that is important in terms of when I think about the workforce at VLA, and obviously hearing Jennifer's story and the work that she does as Wet Justice. I saw a lot of comparisons around the reasons why you would work for CLC or with legal aid. It's trying to unpack what is your value add and what do you want to contribute towards. So when I look at people that work at legal aid, and this is a very broad sort of statement to make, I guess there is an altruistic element that need to wanting to support local vulnerable communities. And I think that is what drives lawyers, as well as the non-legal staff at Legal Aid, in terms of being able to contribute in their own way, big or small, to supporting the local Victorian community that need it the most, and the clients. So I think that, I mean, that's a very broad statement, but I think that is probably a key thing that separates working at VLA or a CLC versus working in the private sector, where obviously the deliverables are different and the outcomes are different. And it's more about understanding where you fit within the whole broad sector of the legal sector. So I think that's probably the key thing to sort of relay in terms of that question. Yeah.
I was going to add, Brian, I think too that there's really a supportive and structured environment at Legal Aid, especially at, and look, I did a placement there, I haven't been employed there, but my experience, and I've got plenty of friends that work at Legal Aid, is a really structured and supportive environment to commence your career. And because Victoria Legal Aid has civil and crime and other areas of law, there's opportunities for lateral movements and changes into different career paths and things like that, that perhaps, certainly for us in private practice, you are doing criminal defence and that is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've had friends go through the civil team and into the family team and then into management and doing policy work at Legal Aid. And so there's a pretty broad array of opportunities.
Yeah. Yep, I would agree with that. But we have different programs at Legal Aid, so those opportunities to make those lateral moves can be done within the organisation, as opposed to in the private sector. The other thing I was going to mention, probably earlier on, I probably didn't touch on this in my initial questions that Matthew asked, was also wanting to reaffirm the comments that Louise and Jennifer made around getting that sort of non-legal experience while you're at university is really important. So opportunities to apply for roles. I've seen examples in our organisation where staff that have started off working as legal assistants or administrators have been able to move through into lawyer positions a couple of years down the track, and that actual transition was a lot more easier for them to make because they had a good understanding of legal processes, were able to demonstrate that in addition to having gained the qualification as in law. And I think that really gave them a more holistic and well-rounded sort of experience in terms of not understanding just the lawyering side of things, quote unquote, but then understanding the actual process and the procedures that sit behind it as a legal assistant. So consider those opportunities while you're at university, and also don't discount your non-legal experience when you're applying for roles as a lawyer. I've had some examples where recently I provided some advice on a resume to a mature age student who had recently graduated from law. And when I looked at the resume, she had removed everything in relation to her non-legal work experience. So as a recruiter, when I looked at that, I actually thought, oh, this is a person that's just come out of university, must be fairly young. That was my initial assumptions. But then when I actually got to meet her, I realized very quickly that she had 15 years work experience as a nurse prior to going back to study. So the key thing that I sort of walked away from that example was sort of providing that advice around don't discount your non-legal work experience, because that is so important in terms of being able to showcase your skills and abilities, especially when working with clients. There's a lot of transferable skills that you may not think is relevant in a lawyer role, but they really do come into play when it comes to that client interaction piece. The other thing I was going to mention as well is if you have got a lot of flexibility, is also consider regional roles within the state. It's a great way to actually gain that experience, especially if you don't have any commitments and you have a lot of flexibility coming out of studies around where you want your first, where you want to take your legal career. I think it's really important to cast the net wide and consider those regional roles, because you will get a lot of exposure to different types of law in the local office, and be able to then expand on that later on down the track, and potentially also help you realize your direction, your career direction later on, if you choose to return back to Melbourne, for example. There's a lot of examples at VLA where that does happen too.
I think that the non-legal thing is really important. I just hired a paralegal who's studying law with the intention to hire as a lawyer. She has never worked in the law, but has worked night shifts at McDonald's for 4 years. And I just thought, if she can tough that out and tough out that crowd, she can deal with our plainly difficult clients that call. And so I think acknowledging your non-legal skills, put them out the front, put them out there, be proud of them. There are things that we are looking for more than, you know, A+ all the time.
That's great. Thanks so much for those answers, and thanks, Darcy, for that question. I'd like to call on Harry now. I believe, Harry, you have a question?
Yeah, I think, Louise, you touched on it a little bit just towards the end. Just to, I suppose, give a little bit of background. I come from a financial background. I'm a mature age student, and this question is to all of you. I'm a mature age student. I know I don't look mature, but I am a mature age student. But when looking at prospective candidates to join your businesses or the firms that you work within, transcripts, how important is it in terms of, I know, look, obviously there are people that are going to have amazing grades and people that are going to have so-so and just above pass. But in terms of our transcripts getting into the market or getting into the industry, and then also at the same time, especially coming from, I know I can recognize a couple of names in the group chat that are also mature age students. How do you find it in terms of the competition for a mature age student with reasonably so-so marks, or even an average student, regardless of age, how they would compare on the market with so many graduates coming out every year from all the different universities?
We don't ask for transcripts. They,
you are my best friend. Okay.
I barely passed criminal law, evidence law, and advocacy. So it'd be a bit hypocritical of me to sit here. Look, I mean, when people do elect to provide their transcripts, you know, some people just send them in. We'll look at them, and you know, it's certainly appealing when someone has done really, really well at uni. It shows a lot of things about them. Certainly not determinative for me by any means, especially in circumstances where someone's had life experience and professional experience outside of the law. They bring a wealth of experience to the firm and to the role that you simply cannot get from studying. I didn't do particularly well at uni. I worked 3 jobs. I was volunteering. I had a family, but I can bring something to the job that other people can't. And I think all workplaces want all types.
Yeah,
that's my experience. And it's just about putting it in a way that shows, again, that value alignment, I think. But you know, and a profession outside of the law is welcome to me.
Okay, no, that's good to know. I know I actually worked with, I don't know, I think Jennifer, you might know her, Tess Matthews. I worked for Tess for my internship, and she was great. But at the same time, it was for her, she'd mentioned that, look, it's not a massive deal, but don't stress, Harry. It's something, I think, from what I've seen of yours, it should be all right. But my idea was to head towards the CLC route, and work within something similar to what Tess did. I was quite inspired by the work that she did. But I suppose maybe, you know, if I'm sitting down for an interview with Jennifer, then maybe she'll briefly look over my transcript and go, yeah, okay, yeah, he's all right.
We don't ask for transcripts either, Harry.
Okay.
I would echo the same the same advice, which is, you know, if it doesn't ask for a transcript, you don't need to provide one. And it's really about provide prior experience is really helpful. You know, if I was looking for in an advocacy role doing you know, submissions, or even, you know, organizing in the community,
Yeah.
or volunteering in a neighborhood house, I would love that kind of stuff, because it shows that they're interested in working with communities experiencing disadvantage. So that's, I guess, what I would say about that. And transcripts aren't the be all and end all.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. I think, May, there was also some questions in the chat. I think Sam.
Yeah, Sam's got a question. I think this is to the entire panel, so jump in if you want to give it a go. He says, what's the single most rewarding aspect of your current roles? So maybe start with Jennifer.
Yeah, I think I don't do direct client work in my current role, but hearing about the clients and the outcomes that we're able to achieve for them is hugely rewarding. You know, as I said, we work with young people. So we have school lawyers that go into high schools and help young people with their, you know, their Macca's jobs and their, you know, working in cafes. And workplace exploitation in under 25s is a massive issue, and with international students as well. So when we're able to help a young person have a conversation with their boss, when we're able to help them understand their pay slip, and, you know, if there's issues, being able to ask their boss for the correct pay and getting that money back, obviously that is the most rewarding part of the job, is actually getting people help with their entitlements and enforcing that.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Louise?
I think as a firm, we have some pretty significant wins every now and then, and they are extraordinarily rewarding when you've put in multiple years of work towards whatever case it is. I think the most rewarding part, well, there's probably two things. There are a lot of small, insignificant wins. Insignificant in terms of it doesn't make the paper, you know, but being able to represent someone properly and getting the best outcome for them, even if that's not an acquittal, if it means a plea of guilty and getting them a fair sentence, doing that important day-to-day work is hugely rewarding. For me now, in the position that I have at the firm, watching new lawyers come into the profession and you know, fight the good fight, get really impassioned about it, supporting each other, you know, sending around emails, such and such got bail today for this really vulnerable client, they've done an amazing job. That kind of stuff is really exciting to work in a team, and I think certainly the professions that we have spoken tonight all work in a team type environment, and it is extraordinarily rewarding to work with other people that care about the same stuff as you do. So doing the job properly, even when it's not particularly glamorous, I find really rewarding, and seeing people move through this industry, it's extraordinary. It's so exciting.
Right. Brian, I might ask you the same question.
Sure. I think there's probably two things that I reflect on in terms of what I enjoy at VLA. I think from the outset, it really is providing our new lawyers who are starting off with their careers with someone they can speak to and provide that support. And that's certainly been something that I've really enjoyed whilst at VLA is being able to give that advice and support. I often say to them, ask me the stupid questions, ask me your silly questions, because I think that's through that process that you're able to understand and gain more confidence around your career and your profession and how you want to grow, and to be able to support someone through that process to then see them flourish in a couple of years' time. That is a very rewarding part of my role. But secondly to that, I think VLA is also quite a diverse and inclusive organization to work for. And from a personal values piece, that's also something that's very important, not just at an individual level, but also at an organization level. There's a number of things that we want to support in terms of the diversity and inclusion objectives for the organization. And my role does play a part in terms of that from a recruitment perspective to support the organization achieve its goals. So that's probably the two main things that come to mind.
That's great. Thanks, Brian. And Pam, I might hand that question over to you.
Thank you, Matthew. I think it's sort of two things in particular. One is I really enjoy the diversity of our students and what they bring to the college, but also to their placements and to their internships and their volunteer work. And often the feedback I receive is that they're able to sort of navigate and look at the client's perspective, and coming from diverse backgrounds, some of their life experience that they've had, they've been able to be very relatable. And the second one is the feedback that I receive from students when they've undertaken a placement or internship or clerkship. And going into it, often very hesitantly, or not quite sure, will they be able to do what they've been asked to do, etc. And then it's been an amazing experience for them, and then going on to achieve a whole lot of other opportunities as well, or then just go off and like we said before, I think Louise mentioned, or Jennifer mentioned, the LinkedIn and connecting with other people. So that first leap of faith and the feedback I get from students is so rewarding to hear.
That's great. Thanks so much, Pam. Joseph, you've got a question.
Yes. First of all, a really great panel discussion. I really enjoyed it. I have a general question for the panel. I was really interested in hearing the different career paths that each of you have taken, particularly at the beginning stages of your careers. And on that note, I think taking that first step into the real world can be quite daunting. Like for me, I have my first placement with VLA tomorrow. So I was wondering, what were some of the misconceptions about the legal workforce did you have when you first started out? Or what were some of the concerns or worries that you had, and how did you deal with that?
Louise, I might start with you if you don't mind with that question.
God, it's hard to think of what I wasn't stressed about when I was starting my career. I felt like there was, a sea of law students and law graduates looking for jobs, and I was a sort of indistinguishable face amongst that crowd. When I was at uni, and I don't know if it's still the case, everyone kept saying, law's the new arts, everyone's got a law degree. I was like, oh God, there's been so much work and I'm never going to get a job. I realised that a career is a really, really long time. And, I don't know if I should put this on the record now, it's being recorded, but part of me feels like I haven't done enough variety before I've decided to become, or been offered the opportunity to become a partner. Careers, and Jennifer's shown, can take extraordinary turns. It is not a linear trajectory. And the greater amount of experience you have, the better you are at your job, no matter what kind of experience, what lateral moves you take time out of the law to do something else and not practice, whatever it may be. So, I mean, it's hard to not feel overwhelmed, I think, at the start, but try to keep as much perspective as you can. If you are committed and you chase the things that you love, the cream will rise to the top and you will find opportunities. I think if you follow the things that you enjoy. So a little bit trust the process, even though that sounds a bit fluffy. But, you know, I also think don't get disheartened if you have to take a position that's not your dream position, because, you know, all roads lead to Rome, and, you know, you might end up somewhere that you absolutely love and you never saw on your plate at the start. So, yeah, try not to be overwhelmed.
That's great. And I just wanted to say that I was interested when you mentioned about how you felt that you were a little bit of an outsider to the law with some of your students, as in that you didn't have anyone that was sort of connected in your own family and your own space that was connected to that law. I have a similar, you know, sort of, I guess, anxiety based around that as well. Obviously, I'm a mature student, so this is really my second career. But I remember I said when I was considering it, I said to Mum, hey, do we know any lawyers in the family? And she's like, oh, no, we're not that fancy. We don't know any lawyers. And so that was, it's been since, that was probably, you know, 3 or 4 years ago now. And I've met lots of lawyers since, and it's been really interesting. But there was a bit of anxiety around that based when I first started out as well. So
when I made partner, which was not long ago, and I told my grandparents, I invited them to stop encouraging me to do a trade, and that we have indeed enough tradespeople in the family, and that I was going to be the black sheep, as it turns out.
Yeah, well, that's right. My parents were all tradespeople as well. My dad's a builder.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thanks so much. And I think I'll just open that question up to Jennifer, and I think I've got one more question, and we'll just be finished.
Sure. So the question's about misconceptions about the legal workforce and concerns and worries. Look, as I mentioned, I forgot to apply for clerkships when I was at uni because I was busy doing other things. And so I didn't really think about it hard enough, I think. But then when I did get into a commercial firm, I did realize that it was a whole other world that I wasn't expecting. And I think it's really easy to get concerned around where you're going when you get those jobs, that first job. And I guess it doesn't matter if it's in a corporate firm or if it's in legal aid or wherever. Your first job feels like the biggest step of your career, but it is just the first step of your career, I think. And so I was really concerned, you know, as I said, I spent 5 years doing corporate employment law, working for employers. And my passion always was with, you know, human rights and discrimination and workers' rights. And so that always felt a little contradictory. And I never wanted to be a partner at a firm. After working in corporate law for a long time, I realized, like, I don't want to do that. So senior associate corporate law firm partner program. So that was my concern, was like, how do I find a satisfying career or job that doesn't involve being a law firm partner? And through working in the public service, you know, taking non-legal jobs, you know, I've found my way in that sense. And then, like I said, the first job working in a corporate firm was just the first step in a long line of different things that I've tried. So I guess that was a concern, but you shouldn't be concerned about it, I should say, because you could end up in somewhere you can't even imagine right now.
I was just going to add, I went and spoke to the person at my university who had the equivalent job that Pam has, and I was like, oh, I'm never going to find a job, and everyone's got a clerkship at Allen's, and I'm just, you know, and she encouraged me to take a job at a suburban family law firm and said, look, this is a really good in, you never know, they might brief some criminal stuff because those worlds overlap. And anyway, that's how I got my job. All you need is one ally that says, actually, this is a really good opportunity, you should take this. And so utilize the resources that are around you. It's really hard to go it alone. So speak to the people that are there to assist you, because they know more about this industry than anyone at uni, and they can see opportunities that perhaps aren't immediately apparent when you're in the shoes of a very anxious student or grad lawyer.
Great, thanks so much. Great answers. We've had a few more questions come through now. I might just ask Shiny New, if you would mind asking your question, please.
Thank you. It's Shani.
Sorry, Shani.
I've been teased my whole life about Shiny New, but yep, I worked through that. So first I want to thank you all for taking of your time. It's really appreciated to speak to us tonight. and to say to Pam, thank you for all the time that you have spent talking me through this journey. I'm actually at a point where when I started, I was very determined to go to school and to get my degree. It was a purpose to an end. And now that I'm coming to the end, I'm thinking, oh, I enjoyed it so much. I'm really going to miss it. So I want to thank you all at VU for making it a wonderful opportunity and experience. So based on something that was discussed before, I'm being encouraged to do the honors program from a few different places and sources. So I wanted to ask you all in the industry, do you find that it does make a difference? Because what I was told is that if you can do honors in a specific area that you should, because it would help you stand out. So, and it's the area that I'm very interested in. So my question to you is, do you find that it does indeed do that? And anybody can answer.
I'm happy to start. I certainly know that when I was at corporate firms, the honours degrees were certainly something they looked for, you know, in the corporate space. In government, probably they're interested in that thing. In CLC, as I said, it's about fit, it's about culture, it's about values. We want great people, but we also want people that can believe in the work that we're doing. I did do an honours degree, but in history, you know, and, you know, maybe that made me stand out. I don't know. I just loved studying it. It was great. It was great fun studying. And then later on, I did a master's degree. I did my LLM at Melbourne University. And I was told by the law firm I worked for to not do a master's in law because I already was practicing and there was no point in doing extra study. But because I could just do the work. But I think that was more about doing the billable hours, and spending time studying was taking away from that. But then I moved into the public sector and everyone loved the fact that I had a master's degree. So I think it depends on kind of the interest that you have and whether you think you're going to love studying it, because I loved doing my master's. I loved doing my honours degree in history and it made me, you know, I guess a more rounded person, but maybe not. Like, I mean, if I wanted to work in a corporate firm, they wanted me to just do the law.
Do the actual work.
Yeah. But I love studying, so I mean, I would probably say go for it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Matt, I'm just going to interrupt. I think we have enough time for maybe one or two more questions.
Yeah, great. I might call on Marcy if you'd like to ask your question, and then I think there'll be one more question if we've got time from Natasha.
Thank you. Thank you again, everybody. This question's for Pam, if that's okay. I sit back and I think, okay, I know I've got to do my placement. And then all of a sudden I get an email from you saying this availability. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's reading my mind. Okay, is this email only for me? I know that it's for everybody and I know that I've got to do it. My concern is I'm an extremely loyal person. So I would hate to give my time to someone and then just say goodbye and then say, oh, because I will over-exceed on everything. And then they're going to say, oh, but she doesn't want to hang around. I have no intention of hanging around. So that's where my hesitation is. I know exactly where I want to go and I'm not finding a position where I want to be, where I'll see myself. So I think I've got to take it down. I've got to go see you personally. I'll need to have a chat with you. But I was told recently that clerkships, they understand that you're only there for 12 months. Is that true?
Right. So just in relation, that's actually a great comment and question and made me smile. So with the clerkships and the traineeship is the 12 months, but with the clerkship, yes, they understand that there's parameters and guidelines for clerkships, and it's a 3-week commitment for a clerkship for a student in the penultimate year. So there, you know, there's parameters around that, and so the host and the law firm understands what they are. So, you know, you're not going to do anything wrong as such when you apply for those opportunities, because you're applying within certain guidelines.
Okay, and there's no expectation, because I will not do a half job, even if it's for however limited time it is. But if they do offer me something, I'm just scared of saying, I don't want to hang around. And that's where I just feel like I'll say, yep, of course, yeah, I'll sign in, I'll do it. Yeah. And I just don't want to put myself myself in a position where they will ask me. And I think that's where my fear is.
Yeah. And usually, when you're entering into, for example, what we call a work integrated learning agreement, so a placement or internship, we have the sort of start and end date that fits in with the internship unit. And so you know what your commitment is, and the host knows what the commitment is from the beginning. And also, for example, the clerkships are the same. So usually we enter into those, and you make like an informed decision around those at the beginning. And then, if an opportunity arises where you're, amazing, and they would like to offer you an ongoing employment, then you can make those decisions, and you don't have to commit to that if it doesn't suit your needs at the time.
Okay.
But certainly we can make a time to discuss that, and there's a career session that we'll host in relation to a lot of these questions that some of the students will have. So,
and also there were the judges when you're what's it called when you assist them, the
Vic Bar Shadow program.
Yeah, that they're limited also to 12 months.
No, that's a different program. The Vic Bar Shadow program is a 4-week program.
Okay, I'm liking these short little things. That's good. But I'll just need to talk with you one-on-one, I think.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As an employer at a private firm, I certainly have never been offended or angry at someone when we've offered them an opportunity and they've said, I'm really passionate about another avenue. We wish them the absolute best of luck and are relieved that they know exactly what it is they want. So I think you can take some comfort that people in the industry know that people have other goals, and when there's parameters in place, it's certainly not a situation where you're going to offend anyone.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
Okay, thanks for the question, Marcy, and thanks for the answers. We've just got a couple of minutes left, so I might just finish this up with one last question that's come through in the chat from Natasha. Natasha says, hi, Brian, Jennifer and Louise. Thank you for your time. I have a question about work-life balance while being a lawyer. I have lawyer friends who struggle with the balance and managing career burnout that ultimately impacts their work. Have you seen the tides change post-COVID, and how do you manage the work-life balance? The big question, we've only got a couple of minutes, so I might start perhaps with you, Louise, and then we'll move over and get one more answer, and then we should be done.
Yeah. Private criminal defence is not renowned for its work-life balance, to be blunt about that. It is improving. It is, even in the time that I have been practicing, it is 7:30. There is not a single person in our office. That is a change from how things used to be, certainly. And I think it ebbs and flows in terms of when I'm in a trial, I certainly, am really pushed. But we're lucky enough to work in environments now that respect the need for people to have a life outside of the law and recognise that we do better work when we're not burnt out. And so there are times when, I work half days and take time off and things like that. It's certainly a concern within the industry more broadly, and I think it's good that there is a greater awareness of it now. I think that for me, the biggest concern about grad lawyers is burnout, and especially where it's said over and over to us that this is a really competitive industry, etc. The need to or the desire to work yourself so hard to impress those that for whom you want a job ultimately. Increasingly, and I think that this is something that we are doing and can do better, is recognise that people with boundaries make really good lawyers. They make good lawyers because they have boundaries with their clients. They make good lawyers because they can recognise burnout and ways to put that in place to make sure that it doesn't reach a stage where their work or their clients suffer. So it's good that people are aware of it, and I think it's good to be sort of quite open with your employers and your colleagues around putting that in place. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much. And that might be a good time to finish the Q&A. I really want to just extend my appreciation to the 4 panelists that we've had today. I'd like everyone to put their hands together and just show their appreciation. It's been a fantastic panel and some excellent tips, and I'm particularly enthusiastic, and I really hope that everyone here today has really gotten something out of it like I have. I know that I'm going to hand it back over to May now, who I know will want to grab a picture from everyone, and then she will close the meeting. But again, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for attending, and especially to our 4 guests, but also everyone else who has taken time out of the 3rd week in the block. We're all stressing about assignments and exams next week, so it's absolutely fantastic. We've had such a good turnout tonight, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you once again, Pam, Brian, Louise, and Jennifer, for giving up your valuable time today to share with us your expertise and further help our understanding regarding getting started in our own personal law careers. So it's that time of the night where I will be taking a photo. So if you're interested in being part of the picture, please turn on your cameras now. Okay, so I'll give everyone a chance to come in. Okay, so I'm going to count down and then I want everyone to give me big smiles. So 3, 2, 1, smile. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much once again for tonight. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys. Thanks,
All right.
Matt.
All the best.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.